The morning sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the city cafe, casting a warm glow on the polished tables and the neatly arranged chairs. The place had a calm elegance that made it a favorite among people who liked quiet mornings before the city fully woke up. Among the usual crowd, there was a young waitress moving carefully from table to table. She was not flashy, but there was a certain spark in her eyes, a mix of determination and kindness that made her stand out. Every morning, she arrived early, dressed in her simple uniform, ready to serve anyone who walked in with a smile, even if her own life was full of struggles. She carried a tray with freshly brewed coffee and pastries, moving gracefully through the tables, greeting regular customers who had grown used to her presence. Her hands worked swiftly, but her mind was alert, observing every small detail in the cafe, from the expressions of the customers to the way the sunlight shifted across the polished floor. She had learned to notice little things that most people ignored, a skill she had developed over years of watching people and listening to conversations while working long hours to support her family. On this particular morning, a black luxury car pulled up outside the cafe. Its presence turned a few heads as it came to a slow stop near the entrance. The chauffeur opened the door, and out stepped a man who immediately drew attention. He was sharply dressed in an expensive suit, with an air of confidence that suggested he was used to being in control wherever he went. People in the cafe exchanged quick glances, the kind of man who clearly belonged to a different world than most of the regulars. The waitress noticed him immediately, as she always did with new faces. She walked over to his table, offering a polite smile. "Good morning, sir. Would you like coffee or breakfast?" He looked up briefly, his expression polite but distant, as if he was already focused on matters far more important than the menu. "Coffee, black, and bring me a menu. I'll decide quickly," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. The waitress nodded and hurried off, pouring a fresh cup of coffee for him while glancing at the menu in her hands. She felt a small curiosity, the kind that sparked whenever someone new and unfamiliar came into her cafe. As she placed the coffee on the table, she noticed a thick folder lying in front of the man. His hand rested on it protectively, and the edges of the pages peeked out. From where she stood, she could see that the folder contained documents, likely contracts or legal papers. The man's assistants, two sharply dressed individuals, hovered nearby, ready to respond to his commands. The scene was unusual for a cafe where most customers were there for a quiet breakfast or a morning chat. She felt a subtle tension in the air, a sense that something important and serious was happening. While serving him, she heard snippets of the conversation between the man and his assistants. They spoke in hushed tones, discussing figures, clauses, and agreements. She didn't understand every word, but one line caught her attention. A particular clause was mentioned more than once, and the way they spoke about it made her pause. Something about it seemed off. She had no formal training in law or finance, but her instincts told her that this was not an ordinary detail. She remembered a story her father once told her about someone losing everything because they didn't notice a small, hidden detail in a contract. The thought lingered in her mind as she went about her work. She served other tables while keeping a discreet eye on the man and his assistants. She noticed his focused expressions, the subtle way his hands fidgeted over the papers when no one was looking. It was as if he carried a weight on his shoulders, a seriousness that most people would overlook. She wondered what kind of decisions were being made, what consequences lay hidden in those pages. Her curiosity was growing, mixed with a sense of responsibility. She had learned in life that small details mattered, that sometimes the courage to speak up could make a difference. After delivering another round of coffee, she approached his table once again. She felt a quiet nervousness, aware that she was stepping into a situation far beyond her usual duties. But she reminded herself that honesty and courage were important, no matter how small the role she played in someone else's life. She cleared her throat softly and said, "Excuse me, sir. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I noticed something in your papers that might be important. It could be a problem if overlooked." The man looked up, eyebrows raised in mild surprise. He was not used to being interrupted by someone outside his circle of advisors. There was a brief pause, a moment of tension as he studied her face. "I'm sorry, did you say something?" he asked, his tone polite but curious. "I couldn't help but notice a clause in your contract," she said carefully. "I'm not an expert, but it seems like it could cause issues if it's not handled properly. I thought you should know." The assistant stiffened, exchanging quick glances. The millionaire himself looked intrigued but slightly amused, as if he found the idea that a waitress would comment on a legal contract both unexpected and improbable. "Are you serious? You understand contracts?" he asked, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "I don't understand everything, sir," she admitted with a calm smile. "But I've seen situations before where small details made a huge difference. I just wanted to point it out in case it helps." There was a silence as he leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, the quiet confidence that came from observation and experience, even if not formal training. For a moment, he felt a flicker of doubt, a small challenge to the belief that only experts could spot important details. The audacity of a stranger noticing something he might have missed sparked a mix of irritation and curiosity within him. The waitress felt her heart race slightly, but she remained composed. She knew that she could not force anyone to listen, but she could speak the truth she observed. She took a small step back, giving him space while letting her words linger. The cafe seemed quieter in that moment, as if the usual background hum had dimmed, leaving only the tension between the two. The millionaire's assistants whispered among themselves, clearly concerned about the interruption. One of them leaned forward and said quietly, "Sir, perhaps we should," but he held up a hand, signaling them to pause. The man's attention was fully on the waitress now. There was something about the simplicity and clarity of her warning that cut through the layers of corporate jargon and legal complexity. For the waitress, the encounter was nerve-wracking, but also empowering. She had faced many challenges in her life, and speaking up in situations that mattered was part of who she was. She reminded herself that courage wasn't about knowing everything. It was about noticing what others didn't and taking action when it counted. She felt a quiet satisfaction in having said what she believed was right, regardless of the outcome. The millionaire continued to study her for a long moment. His expression shifted slightly, a subtle change from amusement to curiosity. He realized that he had underestimated someone based on their position, assuming that a waitress would have nothing of value to contribute to his world of contracts and high-stakes decisions. That realization alone was uncomfortable but necessary. A small awakening to the truth that intelligence and insight could come from unexpected places. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. "All right," he said slowly, his tone measured. "I'll take a look at what you noticed. Thank you for speaking up." The waitress nodded politely, a small smile playing on her lips. She returned to her work, keeping her composure, while a quiet sense of relief settled over her. She didn't know what would happen next, but she felt certain that she had done the right thing. Even if the moment passed without recognition, she had acted with integrity, and that was worth more than any praise. As the morning went on, the cafe returned to its usual rhythm, with the sunlight continuing to stream through the windows and the chatter of customers filling the air. The millionaire remained at his table, now quietly reviewing his papers, occasionally glancing up at the waitress as he processed her words. There was a new tension in his demeanor, a subtle shift in how he approached the documents in front of him. Something as simple as a few careful words had planted a seed of awareness that he could not ignore. The waitress moved gracefully among the other tables, serving coffee and pastries, all the while keeping an attentive eye on the man who had so unexpectedly entered her morning routine. She knew that life often had moments like this, where small actions could create ripples far larger than anyone expected. She didn't know the future, but she understood the present, and she understood that courage, honesty, and observation were powerful tools, even for someone in her position. By the time the morning crowd began to thin, the millionaire had closed his folder temporarily, deep in thought. He occasionally rubbed his forehead, reflecting on the clause she had mentioned. The waitress cleaned tables nearby, her movements precise and careful, aware of the tension still lingering at that one table. There was no drama, no grand gesture, just the quiet power of a small action done with care and honesty. And in that ordinary cafe, amidst the smell of coffee and the soft clatter of cups and plates, a remarkable encounter had taken place. A simple waitress had dared to speak up, noticing a detail that even a millionaire might have overlooked. It was the beginning of a story neither of them could yet fully predict. A story of courage, respect, and the surprising impact that one person could have on another, simply by paying attention and daring to act. The day was just beginning, but already, something had changed. The afternoon sun had begun to shift, painting golden streaks across the cafe floor. The morning rush was over, leaving the place quieter than before. The waitress moved between tables, clearing empty cups and wiping down surfaces, but her mind kept returning to the man in the black suit and the documents he had carried. Something about that clause still lingered in her thoughts, an uneasy feeling she couldn't shake. She didn't know why, but she felt it was more important than she realized. Life had taught her to trust her instincts, and today, they were telling her that speaking up had started something bigger than just a conversation. Meanwhile, the millionaire remained at his table, his folder open in front of him, eyes scanning the lines of text that now seemed more complicated than before. He had tried to dismiss the waitress's words initially, thinking them naive or irrelevant. But as he read, he realized that the clause she had mentioned could indeed create serious problems. It wasn't just a minor detail. It was a trap that could cost him significantly if overlooked. His confidence wavered for the first time that day. He felt a rare mix of surprise and unease, a sensation he was not accustomed to. He prided himself on knowing every detail of his deals, yet here was a moment that shook that belief. He called over one of his assistants, a young woman with sharp eyes and a meticulous mind. "Double-check this clause. Look carefully. I want every possible outcome analyzed," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency. The assistant nodded and began flipping through the papers, highlighting passages and making notes. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the city beyond, the noise of traffic and construction contrasting sharply with the quiet tension of his table. He thought about the waitress again. It was unusual for him to be affected by someone he barely knew, someone who had not been invited into his world of contracts and boardrooms. Yet her words had struck a chord. Across the cafe, the waitress served a table of regular customers, but she couldn't focus entirely. Her mind kept returning to that brief interaction. She wondered if she had done the right thing, if she had spoken too boldly. But deep down, she knew she had no choice. She had always believed that ignoring what you notice in life could lead to regret. There were countless moments in her past where hesitation had caused loss or missed opportunity. Today, she had acted differently. She had spoken up. She reminded herself that courage often felt uncomfortable, but it was necessary. She carried a tray with fresh coffee and glanced at the millionaire's table. He was still hunched over the documents, and his assistant was working frantically. She noticed the subtle change in his demeanor, a tension in his shoulders that wasn't there before. It was almost like she could feel the weight of his concern from across the room. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should intervene again, but she decided to give him space. Some lessons had to be learned in their own time, and sometimes the best way to help was to step back and let others realize the truth for themselves. The millionaire's focus was intense. His assistant brought him notes, pointing out the risks and consequences associated with the clause. He listened carefully, absorbing information that was both familiar and alarming. He realized that if he had signed the contract without noticing this detail, it could have led to serious financial and legal consequences. The sense of vulnerability he felt was new and uncomfortable. For someone accustomed to control and precision, this was a rare and humbling experience. As he reviewed the documents, he thought back to the waitress's calm and measured explanation. He remembered her exact words, the clarity and confidence with which she had spoken. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. There was no arrogance, no pretense, only honesty and concern. It was a reminder that wisdom and insight did not always come from formal education or titles. Sometimes it came from observation, from paying attention to details that others overlooked. The thought was unsettling but enlightening. The waitress, meanwhile, continued her work, serving customers and cleaning tables, but she felt a strange mixture of anxiety and hope. She didn't know if her words would make a difference, but she hoped they would. She had learned in life that small actions could have significant impacts. A kind word, a warning, a moment of honesty. These were not always grand gestures, but they could change the course of events in ways that were impossible to predict. She believed in the quiet power of integrity, and she trusted that it would guide her through situations like this. As the afternoon wore on, the millionaire's assistants finished their analysis. They brought the findings to him, and he read every line carefully. The conclusion was clear. The clause was indeed a trap, and ignoring it could have been disastrous. He felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that he had discovered the problem in time, and frustration at himself for almost overlooking it. He thought about the waitress again and realized that her intervention had been crucial. She had seen something he hadn't, and she had spoken up despite the risks. It was a rare display of courage and insight, qualities he admired but rarely encountered in his world. He called for a private moment with his assistant. "This clause could have cost us millions," he said quietly. "It was nearly overlooked. Who pointed this out?" The assistant looked at him, confused. "A waitress, sir," she said. "She mentioned it when you were here this morning." He paused, the words sinking in. A waitress, a simple cafe employee, had prevented a major financial disaster. It was a thought that both humbled and surprised him. He had underestimated her, assuming that someone outside his sphere of influence couldn't possibly understand the stakes. Yet here was proof that insight and intelligence could come from anyone, regardless of their position or status. Back at the counter, the waitress served a customer and noticed the man looking up from his documents. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a silent acknowledgement, a quiet thank you without words. The waitress felt a sense of warmth and satisfaction, knowing that her actions had mattered. She returned to her work, careful not to let her thoughts show, but inside, she felt a growing confidence. She had spoken up when it counted, and it had made a difference. The afternoon continued with its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere at the millionaire's table was different now. There was a quiet seriousness, a shift in focus. He reviewed the documents with renewed attention, considering every detail, every possibility. He realized that he had learned a valuable lesson, not just about contracts but about humility and the importance of listening. Wisdom could come from unexpected places, and arrogance could blind even the most experienced. The waitress moved among the tables, her presence calm and steady. She served coffee, cleared dishes, and listened to the conversations around her, all the while reflecting on the events of the morning. She understood that life often presented unexpected moments where courage and honesty were tested. Today had been one of those moments. She had faced uncertainty, risked being ignored or dismissed, and yet she had acted according to her principles. The feeling of having done the right thing gave her a quiet strength. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting longer shadows across the cafe, the millionaire closed his folder and leaned back in his chair. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, a recognition that sometimes help could come from the most unlikely sources. He thought about the waitress again, realizing that her observation and courage had changed the course of his day, and potentially his business. The realization left him thoughtful, almost reflective, a rare state for someone usually consumed by schedules and decisions. The waitress finished her shift, wiping down the last tables and straightening chairs. She took a moment to breathe, feeling the satisfaction of a day that had been unusual, yet meaningful. She had done something brave, something that mattered, and even if no one else noticed immediately, she knew the value of her actions. Life had a way of testing people, and today she had passed that test with quiet dignity. The millionaire prepared to leave, his mind occupied with the lesson he had learned. He looked at the waitress one last time, considering the unlikely twist of events that had brought them into this brief but impactful connection. There was a recognition in his eyes, a newfound respect for someone who had dared to speak up when it mattered most. It was a reminder that life often brought wisdom and insight in the most unexpected forms. As he left the cafe, the waitress continued her work, unaware of the full impact of her words but content in the knowledge that she had acted with integrity. The day had unfolded in ways neither of them could have predicted. And yet, a simple act of observation and courage had set in motion a chain of events that would change both their lives. The cafe returned to its usual rhythm, the sunlight fading gently as evening approached, leaving behind a quiet sense of possibility and the subtle power of doing what is right when it matters most. Evening settled over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The cafe, usually bustling, had slowed down considerably. Most of the morning and afternoon customers had gone, leaving only a few people scattered across the tables, sipping their last cups of coffee or typing quietly on laptops. The waitress moved through the cafe with calm precision, her energy unwavering despite the long hours. She felt a quiet satisfaction at the end of the day, but there was still a small weight on her mind. The events of the afternoon, the clause in the contract, and the reactions of the millionaire and his assistants. They had left a strong impression, one that she could not easily shake. Back at his table, the millionaire remained absorbed in his thoughts. He had reviewed the documents multiple times, going over every word, every line, and every detail of the clause that the waitress had noticed. The realization that he might have missed such an important detail was humbling. He had always trusted his instincts and experience, yet a simple observation from someone outside his world had brought a serious flaw to light. It was both frustrating and enlightening. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, a reminder that even the smallest oversight could have significant consequences. He glanced across the cafe at the waitress as she moved between tables. She was busy with her work, serving customers and maintaining the calm order of the cafe, unaware of the impact she had already made. He studied her quietly, noticing the calm determination in her movements, the gentle confidence in her expressions. It was unusual, even remarkable, to see such poise and focus in someone so young and in a position most would consider ordinary. He began to wonder about her life, her experiences, and what had shaped her into someone capable of noticing what others had missed. The waitress continued her duties, wiping tables and arranging chairs, all while keeping an eye on the man who had unknowingly changed her day as much as she had changed his. Her thoughts wandered to the afternoon, replaying the brief conversation they had shared. She had felt nervous at the time, uncertain whether she should speak up, yet she had pushed past that uncertainty and done what she believed was right. Courage, she reminded herself, was not the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it. As the cafe quieted further, the millionaire's assistant approached him with a folder of notes. "Sir, we have reviewed the clause thoroughly. The implications could have been serious, but it looks like your awareness now will prevent any issues. The recommendation is to amend the contract before signing." The millionaire nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "I know," he said, his voice low, "but what surprises me is who pointed it out. It wasn't anyone from the team or legal advisors. It was a waitress." The assistant raised an eyebrow, impressed but cautious. "That is unusual, sir. It is rare for someone outside your circle to notice such details." He leaned back, his mind reflecting on the lesson hidden within the incident. It was a reminder that wisdom could come from unexpected places, that people's value was not determined solely by their position or title. He realized that he had underestimated the waitress, assuming her role limited her perspective. Yet she had seen what he had missed. Her courage to speak up had saved him from a potential disaster. It was a humbling thought, one that left a lasting impression on him. Meanwhile, the waitress took a brief break, stepping behind the counter to refill a pitcher of water. Her thoughts drifted to her family, the people she worked tirelessly to support. She thought about how small decisions in life often had far-reaching consequences, how moments of honesty and integrity could ripple outward in ways one could never predict. She believed that everyone had the capacity to make a difference, no matter their role in the world. Today had proven it once again. She glanced at the millionaire, noticing that he was still immersed in the documents. She could see a subtle change in his posture, a shift from confidence to contemplation, from arrogance to reflection. It was as if her words had left an imprint, something he could not easily dismiss. She wondered if he would ever recognize the significance of her observation, or if it would remain just a brief encounter in his busy life. Either way, she knew she had acted with integrity, and that was enough for her. The evening progressed, and a few more customers left the cafe, leaving the millionaire and his assistants in near solitude. He continued to study the documents, considering not only the clause but the broader implications of oversight and attentiveness. His mind was unusually quiet, focused inwardly rather than on external matters. He reflected on past deals, past decisions, and past assumptions about people and situations. The realization settled on him that success was not just about knowledge or experience. It was also about listening, observing, and valuing insights from unexpected sources. He finally closed the folder, taking a deep breath. The tension that had been building in his shoulders began to ease, replaced by a sense of clarity. He understood that the events of the day had been a lesson in humility, a reminder that even the most careful and experienced individuals could overlook critical details. And sometimes help came from those least expected. The waitress had demonstrated insight and courage, and he could not ignore that fact. The waitress continued her duties, clearing tables and serving the last few remaining customers. She moved with calm efficiency, her focus unwavering despite the long day. Her mind remained active, replaying the moments of courage and observation, reflecting on the importance of action and honesty. She had learned over time that life often tested people in small, quiet ways, and that the choices made in those moments could have profound effects. She noticed the millionaire watching her again, and this time, there was a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but she felt it nonetheless. She returned to her work without a word, understanding that recognition was not always immediate or verbal. The quiet affirmation of her impact was enough to strengthen her resolve and confidence. She had spoken up and she had mattered. The assistants quietly gathered the remaining documents, preparing to leave. The millionaire stood and adjusted his suit, ready to depart. He paused for a moment, glancing at the waitress. There was a sense of respect in his eyes, a recognition that went beyond words. He realized that in her simple, unassuming way, she had demonstrated qualities that were rare and valuable: attentiveness, courage, and integrity. It was a reminder that character often mattered more than status or title. As the last customer left and the cafe grew quiet, the waitress took a moment to breathe and reflect. The day had been unusual, marked by an encounter that had tested her courage and reinforced her values. She had acted according to her principles, spoken the truth, and made a difference without expectation of reward or recognition. It was a quiet triumph, one that left her feeling both proud and grounded. The millionaire stepped outside, taking a moment to look back at the cafe. He had learned a subtle but powerful lesson about humility, observation, and the unexpected value of insight from someone outside his usual circle. The experience lingered in his mind, a reminder that success was not solely determined by knowledge or position, but also by the willingness to listen, observe, and act when necessary. The waitress continued to tidy the cafe, her movements calm and methodical. She reflected on the events of the day and felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had spoken up when it mattered, acted with honesty, and demonstrated courage. The encounter had been brief but significant, a reminder that small actions could create meaningful ripples in the lives of others. And though she did not know the full impact of her words yet, she trusted that they had made a difference. As the sun finally set, casting a warm glow across the city streets, the cafe grew quiet and still. The waitress finished her shift, closing the registers and straightening the chairs. She took a moment to step outside, feeling the cool evening air and the satisfaction of a day well spent. The events of the afternoon and evening had left a lasting impression on both her and the millionaire. A quiet story of courage, insight, and the unexpected power of speaking up. It was a reminder that even ordinary people could make extraordinary impacts when they acted with honesty, awareness, and integrity. The next morning arrived with a soft, golden light that filled the cafe with warmth. The streets were busy with people hurrying to work, the the city alive with movement and sound. The waitress arrived early, as she always did, tying her apron and preparing the cafe for the day. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of pastries and the subtle warmth of the morning sun. Despite the usual rush and noise, there was a quiet anticipation in her heart, a feeling that today might be different. Something had shifted after yesterday, and she sensed it, though she didn't know exactly what to expect. She moved through the cafe with practiced ease, arranging chairs, cleaning tables, and making sure everything was ready for the morning crowd. Her mind wandered back to the millionaire, to the moment she had spoken up about the clause. It had been a simple act, a small intervention, but the reactions of the afternoon and evening had left an impression on her. She wondered if he had reflected further on what she had said, or if it had simply been a passing thought. Either way, she had acted with honesty, and that gave her a sense of quiet satisfaction. As the cafe began to fill with customers, she served regulars with her usual warmth and efficiency. The morning routine flowed naturally, but her attention was drawn to the black luxury car that slowly rolled to a stop outside. It was unmistakable, and the presence of the vehicle caused a subtle stir among the few patrons already seated. The door opened, and the millionaire stepped out, his expression composed but with a hint of curiosity. He looked around as he entered the cafe, his gaze eventually finding the waitress as she moved toward another table. She noticed him immediately, a flicker of recognition and surprise crossing her face. The cafe seemed to grow quieter in that instant, as though time had slowed just enough for the significance of the moment to register. The millionaire walked toward her, not with the urgency of a businessman rushing to a meeting, but with measured calm. His assistant stayed behind, giving him space, sensing that this encounter was personal rather than professional. When he reached her, he spoke quietly, his voice carrying both sincerity and a touch of humility. "I want to thank you," he said. "Yesterday, your observation about the clause, it prevented a serious problem. You could have stayed silent, but you didn't. That took courage, and I appreciate it." The waitress felt a mixture of surprise and quiet pride. She smiled politely, keeping her tone humble. "I just noticed something that seemed important, and I thought it was right to speak up. I didn't expect anything in return." He nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Some would have ignored it or assumed it wasn't their place to comment. But you did. That makes a difference. There was a brief pause, a moment where words seemed unnecessary. The respect in his eyes was evident, and the waitress felt a sense of validation, not for recognition, but for having done the right thing. She realized that small actions, taken with honesty and integrity, could ripple outward in unexpected ways. Her simple courage had not only affected him but had the potential to influence decisions that could have far-reaching consequences. The millionaire looked around the cafe, then back at her. "I would like to offer you an opportunity," he said. "It's not just about gratitude. I see intelligence, observation, and courage in you, qualities that are rare. If you are willing, I would like to discuss a role where you can contribute in a meaningful way. Could be life-changing." The waitress was momentarily taken aback. She had not expected anything like this, and the idea of stepping into a world so different from her own was both exciting and intimidating. She took a breath, weighing her thoughts carefully. I appreciate your offer," she said slowly. "It's unexpected, but I am open to learning more and seeing how I can help." He smiled, a subtle warmth in his expression. "That's all I ask. Let's talk details. I want you to understand the full scope of what's possible, and I want you to make the choice with full awareness." They moved to a quieter corner of the cafe, away from the few remaining customers. He explained the opportunity in clear, simple terms, outlining the potential for growth, learning, and meaningful involvement in his projects. The waitress listened carefully, asking questions, absorbing information, and considering the possibilities. Each detail added clarity and excitement, and she realized that this was more than a job. It was a chance to expand her life, to step into a world she had only observed from the outside. As the conversation continued, the waitress felt a growing sense of confidence. She realized that her past experiences, her attention to detail, and her courage had all prepared her for moments like this. Life had often tested her, pushing her to observe, act, and persevere despite uncertainty. Now, those skills and qualities were being recognized in a way she had never imagined. It was a reminder that integrity and careful observation could open doors that would otherwise remain closed. The millionaire noticed her thoughtful expressions and nodded. "I don't want you to feel pressured," he said. "This is a choice, not an obligation. But I believe in recognizing talent and courage, wherever it is found. You have shown both, and that deserves acknowledgement." The waitress smiled, a quiet determination in her eyes. "Thank you. I will think about it seriously. I want to make sure I can do it well and honor the trust you are offering." He nodded, satisfied with her response. "That is all I could ask. I believe in giving people the chance to grow, and I see that potential in you. Take your time, but know that the offer is genuine." As they concluded their discussion, the atmosphere in the cafe returned to normal, though the energy between them had subtly shifted. The respect and understanding that had developed in such a short time was tangible. The waitress returned to her duties, feeling a renewed sense of purpose, while the millionaire left, carrying with him the memory of an unexpected, yet meaningful encounter. Throughout the day, the waitress continued her work with a calm focus. Customers came and went, and she served each one with the same warmth and attention she always had. Yet beneath the routine, there was a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement about what the future might hold. She reflected on the lessons of the previous days, the importance of observing details, speaking up with courage, and acting with integrity. She understood that these qualities could shape not only her own life but also influence others in ways she could not yet fully see. The afternoon arrived, and the cafe began to empty again. The waitress took a moment to sit and rest, her thoughts drifting to the potential opportunity ahead. She realized that life often presented unexpected chances, and it was up to individuals to recognize and embrace them. She had acted with honesty and courage, and now, those actions had created possibilities she had never imagined. The feeling was both humbling and exhilarating. Meanwhile, the millionaire reflected on the encounter from his office, considering the implications of offering the opportunity to someone who had proven insight, courage, and integrity. He understood that talent and value could appear in unexpected forms and that recognizing and nurturing it could lead to remarkable outcomes. The experience with the waitress had reinforced a lesson that was often overlooked in high-stakes business, that human qualities mattered as much as knowledge and experience. By evening, the cafe had quieted completely. The waitress finished her final tasks, closing the registers, arranging chairs, and making sure everything was ready for the next day. She stepped outside for a moment, feeling the cool air and the fading light of the sun. The day had been transformative, filled with unexpected recognition and the beginning of a new path. She understood that her actions had not only influenced the millionaire but had also opened doors for her own growth and development. The city lights began to glow, and the streets were alive with the movement of people returning home. The waitress walked slowly, reflecting on the day's events and the lessons they carried. Courage, integrity, and careful observation had led to a meaningful connection, one that promised new opportunities and challenges. She felt a quiet confidence in her abilities and a renewed sense of purpose. The small steps she had taken had led to something significant, and she knew that the journey ahead would be shaped by the same principles she had relied upon all her life. As night settled over the city, the waitress returned home, her heart light with anticipation. She thought about the millionaire, the contract, and the opportunity that had been offered. Life had a way of presenting unexpected moments, and she had met this one with courage and integrity. She understood that her choices mattered, that small actions could ripple outward in meaningful ways, and that recognition often came when it was least expected. The millionaire, too, ended his day with reflection. He thought about the rare qualities he had witnessed in someone so young and unassuming. It was a reminder that wisdom, courage, and integrity could emerge from unexpected places, and that those who acted with honesty deserved acknowledgement. He understood that the encounter had changed him, broadening his perspective and teaching him the value of listening and observing carefully. In the quiet of their separate lives, both the waitress and the millionaire had been affected profoundly. A simple observation, a moment of courage, and a willingness to act had created ripples that extended far beyond the walls of the cafe. It was a story of insight, integrity, and unexpected opportunity, a reminder that even ordinary moments could lead to extraordinary outcomes when approached with honesty and courage. And as they moved forward, both knew that the events of these past days would continue to shape their decisions, their perspectives, and the paths they would walk in the days to come. The following morning, the cafe opened with its usual routine, the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods welcoming early customers. The waitress arrived first, as always, tying her apron with practiced efficiency and arranging the tables for the day. Her mind was calm but alert, aware that life had recently shifted in unexpected ways. The events of the past days had left an impression on her, a quiet understanding that small actions, when guided by honesty and courage, could have remarkable consequences. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, knowing that the encounter with the millionaire had changed more than just the contracts on his desk. It had opened doors to new possibilities for her own future. The morning crowd slowly trickled in, regulars taking their usual spots and newcomers quietly observing the polished atmosphere of the cafe. The waitress moved between the tables, serving with warmth and efficiency, her thoughts still returning to the conversation she had had with the millionaire about the opportunity he had offered. She knew that this could be a turning point, a chance to step into a world she had only glimpsed from the outside. The thought was exciting but also humbling, reminding her to stay grounded and true to herself despite the possibilities that lay ahead. Mid-morning, the black luxury car pulled up outside once again. The sight caused a ripple of curiosity among the cafe's regulars. The millionaire stepped out, his expression composed but with a subtle hint of eagerness. This time he carried no folders or documents, only a quiet purpose. As he entered the cafe, the waitress noticed him immediately and felt a flutter of anticipation. Their eyes met, and there was a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding of the journey that had begun days ago. He approached her table, speaking in a calm and respectful tone. "Good morning. I wanted to meet you here rather than in an office. It feels more genuine to connect in a place where we both started this conversation. I hope you don't mind." The waitress smiled politely, feeling a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Not at all. It's the right place for honesty and openness," she replied. They moved to a quieter corner of the cafe, away from the early patrons, and the millionaire began to speak about the next steps. He explained the opportunities in detail, describing the roles she could take, the responsibilities, and the potential for learning and growth. His words were clear and encouraging, emphasizing that her value was not just in observation but in the courage and integrity she had demonstrated. It was a rare acknowledgement, one that made the waitress feel seen and respected. As she listened, she asked thoughtful questions, considering how she could contribute effectively. The conversation flowed naturally, with no pressure or rush. She realized that the opportunity was not just about a job or a position but about trust, respect, and the chance to make a meaningful impact. It was an affirmation that courage and honesty could open doors to paths previously unseen, and she felt a growing sense of excitement and responsibility. The millionaire noticed her thoughtful expressions and nodded approvingly. "I want you to know that this is more than a position. It is a chance to grow, to learn, and to make decisions that matter. I believe in recognizing potential wherever it appears, and you have shown qualities that are rare and valuable. Your insight, your courage, and your integrity. These are the qualities I hope to nurture and support." The waitress felt a quiet pride. She had always believed that observing, acting with honesty, and speaking up when it mattered were important, but she had never imagined that such actions could lead to a life-changing opportunity. The encounter reaffirmed her belief that integrity and courage could ripple outward in unexpected ways, influencing outcomes far beyond immediate circumstances. They spent the next hour discussing practical details, possibilities, and expectations. The millionaire explained that while the opportunity could be transformative, it also required dedication, careful observation, and the willingness to learn continuously. The waitress absorbed every detail, weighing her thoughts carefully. She understood that stepping into this new world required adaptability, humility, and persistence. She felt ready to embrace the challenge, confident that her past experiences had prepared her for moments like this. By the end of their conversation, a sense of mutual respect had solidified between them. The millionaire acknowledged her decision to consider the opportunity thoughtfully, emphasizing that he valued her judgment and integrity above all. The waitress, in turn, felt a deep sense of gratitude for being recognized for qualities she had always held dear. There was an unspoken understanding that this encounter was more than transactional. It was a connection built on respect, trust, and shared values. As he prepared to leave, he spoke one last time. "I am confident that whatever you choose, you will make a meaningful impact. Your courage and insight have already done that, and I look forward to seeing what comes next." The waitress watched him leave, feeling a sense of calm and purpose. She returned to her duties with renewed energy, serving customers with her usual warmth and efficiency. The cafe buzzed with the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of cups, but her thoughts were focused on the future, on the possibilities that had opened up through a simple act of courage. She realized that life often presented moments of opportunity, and it was up to individuals to recognize them, act with integrity, and embrace the journey. Throughout the day, she reflected on the lessons learned from the past few days. The importance of observation, the courage to speak up, and the power of integrity. She understood that these qualities were not just admirable traits but essential tools for navigating challenges, creating meaningful connections, and influencing outcomes positively. The realization filled her with quiet confidence and determination. Meanwhile, the millionaire returned to his office, carrying with him the reflection of the encounter. He thought about the rare qualities he had witnessed and how they had influenced his decisions and perspective. The experience had reminded him that wisdom and value often appeared in unexpected forms, and that recognizing and nurturing these qualities could lead to remarkable outcomes. The lesson was clear. Respect, observation, and integrity were as crucial as knowledge and experience. As evening approached, the cafe quieted down. The waitress finished her shift, cleaning and arranging tables, reflecting on the day's events and the opportunity she had been offered. She felt a sense of accomplishment, pride, and anticipation, knowing that her actions had created ripples that extended far beyond the walls of the cafe. Courage, honesty, and careful observation had led to recognition and a path for growth, affirming her belief that integrity mattered deeply. She stepped outside, feeling the cool evening air and the city lights beginning to glow. The streets were alive with movement, yet there was a calm in her heart, a quiet assurance that she was ready for the journey ahead. She understood that her choices, her courage, and her integrity had set in motion a chain of events that would shape her future in meaningful ways. The millionaire, too, ended his day reflecting on the encounter. He thought about the unusual circumstances that had led him to recognize the waitress's insight and courage, understanding that life often brought lessons in unexpected forms. The experience had broadened his perspective, reinforcing the value of observation, humility, and the recognition of integrity in others. It was a reminder that meaningful connections and opportunities could emerge from the most unlikely places. In the quiet of their separate worlds, both the waitress and the millionaire felt the impact of the past days. A simple observation, a moment of courage, and a willingness to act with integrity had created meaningful change. It was a story of insight, respect, and unexpected opportunity, demonstrating that even ordinary moments could lead to extraordinary outcomes when approached with honesty and courage. The waitress returned home that night with a sense of fulfillment and purpose. She reflected on the journey from a simple act of observation to an opportunity that could transform her life. Life had tested her courage and integrity, and she had responded with honesty and attention to detail. The impact of her actions was profound, not only in the recognition she received but in the confidence and strength she had gained. She understood that life often rewarded those who observed, acted with courage, and stayed true to their principles. The millionaire, preparing for the next day, thought about the rare qualities he had seen in someone so young and unassuming. He reflected on the importance of listening, observing, and recognizing value in unexpected places. The encounter had not only influenced a decision that could have had significant consequences, but had also reminded him of the power of integrity, courage, and attention to detail. It was a lesson he would carry forward, shaping the way he approached people, decisions, and opportunities. As night fell over the city, both the waitress and the millionaire rested with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. The events of the past days had changed their perspectives, opening doors to new possibilities and reinforcing the value of honesty, courage, and careful observation. The story, though ordinary in its setting, demonstrated the extraordinary impact of small actions guided by integrity and insight. It was a reminder that life often provided opportunities in unexpected forms, and that those who acted with honesty and courage could influence outcomes far beyond what they might imagine. The city slept quietly, the cafe dark and empty for the night, holding the echoes of a remarkable encounter. The waitress, resting at home, felt the weight of the day's lessons settle gently within her. She knew that the path ahead would require observation, integrity, and courage, but she was ready. The millionaire, too, reflected on the value of insight, humility, and the unexpected ways people could influence each other's lives. Both understood that life's moments, when met with honesty and courage, could ripple outward, creating change, connection, and opportunity in ways that neither could have predicted. And with that understanding, both prepared to face the future, confident that their actions, guided by integrity, had already made a meaningful difference.